relationships that are healthy. We talked about that. I said let me quickly give you an overview. The cure for loneliness is not dating or marriage. The cure for loneliness is finding a deep, meaningful relationship in Jesus Christ. There is no biblical pattern for dating. I just was in a thrift store in Bethany, Oklahoma, and I saw the book "I Kissed Dating Goodbye," and that was the standard for conservative evangelicals. You don't date, you court, and that kind of was a passing fad. And there's really no pattern for how these relationships get developed in the Bible, but the principles that surface out of biblical courtship are very important. And there are four. Number one, people outside the couple played a significant role. Any couple that isolates themselves from their friends, from their family, and from other people is a couple already in trouble. That's right. Already in trouble. That's right. Don't isolate yourself. Some of the best dating you will ever do is group dating. Date in groups, make friends, be friends. Second, parents were involved from the beginning to the end and held veto power in every situation. I can tell you some amazing stories that some young people were just determined to date and marry another young person, and in this case it was the mother who forcefully stepped in and said, "I'll lock you in a room and never let you out," and may actually have locked them in a room for a little while. Said, "You're not going to do it." And they have lived to thank God over and over and over and over and over that mom stepped in. When my boys were looking around here on campus, particularly with Josh, he's not here so I can tell it, there was a girl on campus after him. And it's amazing, boys are so dumb they can't see that. When girls chased me in high school, I couldn't see it. I remember a teacher came to me one side and said, "You dumbbell, can't you see this girl's after you?" I had no clue. Guys are clueless on those sort of things for some reason. And you just don't have the kind of discernment. It's amazing. Guys think a girl really likes them when she doesn't, or they can't see that they're chasing them. I don't know. We just don't have it. I don't know what it is. But some girl was after Josh, and I always want him to take her home. "Take me home in your truck. Take me home in your truck." I said, "If I ever see her in that truck with you, I'll kill you." And I never saw her in the truck, so I don't know if my bluff was good or not. He's still alive. Listen to your parents. Compatibility of culture and religion was always preeminent. I'm telling you, marrying into the same religious tradition is not a mandate, but I will tell you this: it will solve a lot of problems, potential problems. Find someone that's on the same wavelength as you religiously. Also, sort of a socioeconomic compatibility is helpful. I'm not saying, here again, it's not a mandate. Everybody can change, everybody can grow, everybody can expand. But you know, if you guys, if you marry a girl who's used to an extremely expensive lifestyle, and you know, daddy pampering and petting her with all the things she wants, guess what? Don't ever give her a credit card. Don't ever get a credit card. You're just, socioeconomic compatibility is helpful unless somewhere along the way values merge and blend and everybody grows up. But if they don't, you better pay attention to this one. 4, physical beauty and romantic feelings were not the driving force in biblical marriages and courtship. I know I'm talking to deaf ears, because every guy wants to marry the princess, you know, Cinderella, and every girl wants to marry Prince Charming. But I'm telling you, physical beauty and romantic feelings should not be the driving force, because eventually marriage is like a tub of hot water. It cools off, and you're going to wake up one morning and look at Miss Beauty over there and not really like the person you married. You need to look beyond physical attractiveness on both sides of the aisle and make sure this is a person you can live with, you can love, they can be a friend, and you can walk together. So those are great principles that flow out of biblical courtship. Number one, never date anyone because you need to date. If you just have to date, then you just need to cool your jet engine until you don't have to date. Then that's the safest time to date. Unconditional love, commitment, and security are the things that relationships do. Good relationships provide these things. The primary place to establish intimacy and find happiness is in a relationship with God. The second place to establish intimacy and happiness is in healthy relationships. And so I hope you all have good, healthy relationships. Desperation to date is a recipe for disaster. Don't rush in where fools dare to go. You should not date if dating leads you to do things that are wrong or to justify it or hide it. In 22 years, I've seen a lot of this. It's amazing. A couple starts dating, and then all of a sudden they just kind of pull back from everybody. They're not interested in anybody's counsel. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to sit down and chat and bring themselves up to speed. They go into hiding, and when they go into hiding, that generally means things are happening that should not happen. You should not be dating anyone that you have to minimize the differences of the two of you in order to date. Don't go there. And 4, draw a line on physical contact. If crossed or if insisted on, sever the relationship. That's where we left. We didn't get to this point. Aaron finished speaking, and then this was the final point. You don't hear a lot about physical contact. Maybe you think you hear too much, but I doubt it. I thought about writing my last article in the Revivalist, When I Say Goodbye, a farewell article on things I've learned in 22 years. And I can't tell you how many times a student has stood in this chapel and testified. And almost everybody here comes from a church background. Let's do a little unscientific research. How many of you guys come from a church background? You go to church, you went to church, okay? I think that's unanimous. I didn't see any hands that didn't go up. It may be one or two that didn't come from a church background. Almost all of the kids who come here have some church background of some sort. But I can't tell you how many hundreds over the years, not only in this chapel and in my office, have said, I did not know until I came to GBS that you could have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Ms. V, how many times have you heard that? I can't tell you how many times I've heard it. You're coming from a church background. So I feel like shouting, preach the gospel, somebody. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We assume people know things because they grow up in church. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've had people, young and old and here, say, I have no idea what it meant to be entirely sanctified. Dr. Brown, how many times you heard that one? Hundreds of times. Hundreds of times. And yet we almost entirely here come out of the Wesleyan tradition, yet have no idea what it means. So somebody's assuming a lot. Now, my point. I can't tell you how many kids, typically after they're already in trouble, have looked at me and said, my mom and dad never talked to me about sex. They never told me about the boundaries. They never explained to me the dangers, the issues that lie out there. You see, we assume that somehow, I guess you're going to catch this stuff somewhere, but you just don't. Oh, you can learn it. You can learn it from lots of places, but they're not all they're not always healthy and proper. And so I'm not assuming anybody knows anything. I do assume that you may be one of the most intellectually or at least you have probably the most large amount of sexual knowledge of any student group I've ever stood in from. Bits and pieces of sexual knowledge, because we live in an unbelievably sensual society. Both sides of this aisle have without doubt been exposed to pornography in a fairly extensive way. In many cases, it'll depend. I'm not saying everybody, I'm just saying the weight's on that side that almost everybody here has. And you've seen some things, movies, and it's out there, and people have been exposed to that. And because, particularly on the guy side, when you get exposed to a lot of raw sexual material early on, it programs your brain to think of women only in the sense of just a thing that can sexually gratify me. And you cease to see her as someone to cherish and to love and to build up and to embrace as an equal. Now, I'm not sure where we are on that side. I just don't have the level of experience to comment on it. On this side, how they look at guys. I'm not sure that we're at that point completely or fully or to the same degree. But bad sexual knowledge is bad. Healthy sexual knowledge is good. Paul said, there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity among you. What deeply troubles me, I'm missing this slide's obviously not there. I thought I had this slide. Yes. I'll back up and catch my little furry friend in a moment. This bugs me. Sexual immorality. Okay, I want every guy and girl looking dead at me. I don't put your phone up. Sexual immorality is sub-Christian. I said, look at me. That's right. And if I have to say that again, I'll call you out, because I know your name. You desperately need to hear what I'm getting ready to tell you. In 22 years of working with young people, 22 years ago, nobody would have looked at me and said, we'd had Christian sex, that's all, what's the big deal? Nobody would have even thought that. They had a clear understanding of the line between appropriate contact and inappropriate sexual behavior. But there is a new norm that has come about among us. You say, surely not among us. It's all those wicked people out there in the city. No, it's not. It's right here. And for those listening on live streaming, if we're live streaming, it's not just GBS. It'll be any other Bible college you want to go to. It's a cultural issue, not a subcultural issue with conservatives. It's everywhere. And you don't know that sexual immorality is sub-Christian. You say, why do we not know that? You want to hear the stories? I had a kid sat in my office one time, clearly had engaged in sexual intercourse with another girl. Said to me, we didn't do anything wrong. I said, what do you mean you didn't do anything wrong? He said, we just had intercourse. We never came to completion. We didn't just go. We didn't have an orgasm. So I don't know how to be tactful here and say what I want to say. Maybe you'll get it. But because they engaged in intercourse, and he said, that's Christian sex. That's okay. Yeah, that's right. And he's not the only one in that, living in that realm of stupidity. There was I've been involved in a number of situations with pastors who had pornography or other immoral issues. One such case that I was involved in was a long-term, like 17-year engagement with pornography. Serious stuff. Every week. Pastoring a very large church. A dynamic speaker. And this went on for 17 years. And finally, when it broke, as it always will, when it broke, they actually asked me to come and sit in on the conversation with him, and my whole role in that conversation was to help him understand he was lost and needed to get saved. He'd been doing this consistently, violently for 17 years. And here was his method. Steep himself in the most disgusting stuff you could imagine through the week. Saturday night, have a little prayer meeting, ask Jesus to forgive me, prepare my message, and preach on Sunday morning. And he was a gifted speaker. He could do it. Now, do you actually believe this guy was some sort of a Christian and this is the norm? This is how Christians behave? Some of you do. You actually do. But I'm here to tell you, the Jerusalem Council said it early, said it well. I didn't check the Greek word on it, but I believe it's porneia, isn't it? It is, porneia. It's just not talking about the sex act or adultery or fornication. It's sexual immorality. Any sort of it, engaged in it. It is sub-Christian. You need to hear that. You may not like to hear it this very moment, but you need to hear it because one day you'll thank me for it. And it's a scary, scary thing when people take on new norms. Israel did it with the high places. God said, they're an abomination in my sight. And by the time they had their third king, Solomon was worshiping on the high places. And by the sixth or seventh or eighth king, it had become kind of the way you told a good one from a bad one. This is the way they would say it. Well, he did this and this, but he did not remove the high places. You see, the high places became the new norm. What once was an abomination to God suddenly became acceptable to the common man. There is something uniquely wrong about sexual perversion and immorality. Now, hear me. I did not say sexual activity in the context of a marriage is something bad, nasty, or ugly, or awful. The sex act was created by God. It's a wonderful, beautiful, glorious, happy thing. When exercised in its appropriate place in the context of marriage, it can become a wonderful spiritual thing. But when engaged outside the context of marriage, it has damaging consequences, twisting consequences. Paul said something very unique. He said all sins are outside the body, but this one. Now, drunkenness is not outside the body, and drugs aren't outside the body, and other things aren't outside the body. Paul is saying there's something uniquely damning and damaging about engaging in sexual immorality in the context of calling yourself a Christian. Have I made my point, or do I need to park there for a while? You see this little fella? That's a Siberian ermine. You see them in the Siberian region of Russia. Their fur is highly to be desired. It's an extremely valuable fur. And the Russian Siberian men will hunt the ermine, and here's how they hunt the ermine. The little fella hunts at night. He goes out at night. It's safe, and he hunts his prey at night. The Russian men will go out in the day with their hounds and find the burrow, the den, the hole in the ground. They live in little holes in the ground of the ermine. They find it. They mark the spot. They wait late into the night when they know the ermine's out hunting. They go to the spot with a bag of some form of animal manure, cow manure, horse manure, whatever. And they pile it all around the hole, the entryway, into its den. And then they wait a little bit and set the dogs loose. The dog will pick up the scent of the ermine. The ermine will head for the safety of its den. But when it gets there, all this filth blocks the entrance. The ermine is so protective of its beautiful white coat, it refuses to soil that coat. And so rather than touch that filth, it will put its back to the den, bare its teeth, and face the dogs, which is a certain death. But it'll do that before it'll soil itself. God needs to put that same passion in our hearts for personal holiness and personal purity. I'm not going to soil myself. A smuggler came to a ship captain and said, I've got a load of drugs I want to smuggle. Said, I'm willing to pay $50,000 to have it done. The captain said, no. He said, I'll pay $100,000 to have it done. The captain said, no. He said, I'll pay $150,000 to have it done. The captain pulled his gun and pointed at the man, and he said, get off my boat. You're getting too close to my price. You better know where your price is. And you better know where to draw lines in your life. You better know where to put the barriers in your life. You better understand your weaknesses, because everybody's got them. You're not Superman. You're not. Anybody who thinks I can handle sexual temptation, you're either more than a man or less than one. And there aren't any people in the category more than men. Any girl who thinks she can handle whatever comes her way in sexual temptation is being very, very innocent and needlessly stupid. Because if you push it far enough and you stay in the negotiation long enough, you'll break. Ladies, if you happen to be dating a guy who says, I can't tell you how much I love you so much, and I just need to show how much I love you. And the only way I can show my love for you is to have physical relations. Oh, I want to show you my love. Draw your pistol and say, get off the ship. Get him out. Run from him. Flee. Guys, if you're dating a girl that'll do anything, she'll invite you to her bed to keep you, to hold you, to snag you so you'll marry her. You better run. You better run like Joseph. You say, that never happens to me. You know, it's been happening all along. I can tell you a very, very prominent alumnus from here who was a student in the 60s. And of course, I just thought everybody back in those days must have been solid saints. Nobody had problems back then. He went over to pick his girlfriend up to take her out to Frisch's. She lived off campus. He said, she greeted me at the door with a house coat. He said, I should have known immediately, but I'm just telling you, I know you think you're smart and brilliant and you're wise and discerning, but if he'd have been all of that, he'd have never walked inside the door. But, like the foolish man in Proverbs, he just trips right on inside. She says, I'm not quite ready. I'll be ready in a moment. And then she sneaks into the bedroom and says, hey, I want to show you something. Come in. And so here he is, like a dumb lamb to the slaughter. Here he goes. And she drops the robe. Well, that eventually, at least, he wised up. And he fled. You say, oh, those things never happen. They don't, do they? How many of you have been at Mom and Deb's home and some mom and dad who they were either simple or way too trusting said to you, the fire is nice tonight, it's cold out, we've got a fire on, mama's got all her favorite candles lit and the sofa's there, you guys just sit and have a nice little chat, we're going to go to bed. Boy, I can tell you the kids have been to my office and said, there's where it started. No intention, but that's where it started. Please hear me. Where do you draw the line? I'm going to help you draw a line this morning. Not everybody's going to agree with my line drawing, but somebody's got to do it. So here goes. When you start down the road of a relationship, that relationship should not begin as a physical relationship. If it starts out, as a matter of fact, James Dobson said years ago, you know, everybody around, normally I always thought, well, what do we do when we go on a date, Brother Avery? Well, when you get in your car, read a verse of Scripture and pray together. James Dobson said, do not pray with your date. I thought that was an amazing thing when I heard it. And he went on to say why. He said, praying with your date, prayer has got to be one of the most intimate things spiritually you can do with another person. And so praying with a date may open up a level of touch and intimacy you weren't prepared for. Now, didn't say I agree with that. I just said he said that. He's been down the road a little bit too. The point I'm making here is that even in something as well-meaning as a prayer can create a sense of oneness. If you're holding hands and very close, it can create a sense of intimacy you may not be prepared for. But don't even start dating with the idea, oh, great, I get a chance to touch a girl or touch a guy. Just don't even start down that route. You should start with just no contact. Look them in the eyes, speak, talk, engage in conversation. Let me tell you something, if you can't sit down and have a wonderful conversation with the girl across the table from you, you're going to have a terribly silent marriage. You need to talk. Learn how to talk. Engage in conversation. You don't need contact. Never give your hand to a man you don't plan to give your heart to. Just don't even start down the road. It's cheap, easy physical contact. Just don't go there. You say, oh, come on, Brother Avery, wake up. This is the 21st century. Live a little. I'm well aware of the date and time. What I said is still true. The next step's going to be holding hands. How many of you taken general psychology? Is it general psych where they give you the 12-step bonding process? Is it general? Is that where that happens? I see no teachers shaking their head. They must have ousted that years ago. But one of those classes, they used to give you the 12-step bonding process. If you don't understand that, you need to understand it. Because there is a bonding process that human beings go through. Eye to eye. Conversation. You see a girl first. And it's amazing. You guys can stand up and look at 100 girls sitting over here and nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, You look in the eyes of somebody special and something happens. Fireworks goes off in your brain. Same thing. It happens. Eye to eye. Then it's going to be hand to hand, generally. That's the first contact. People want to hold hands. And then there's going to be a hug. Sideways hug, some kind of hug. It's going to happen. And then, generally speaking, there's what's called, used to call it the goodnight kiss. Now it's just a casual kiss. Or just a little, you know what a kiss is? A kiss is a mouthful of nothing that tastes like heaven and sounds like a cow walking through mud. That's what a kiss is. A little scientific stuff thrown in here this morning. All right. Kiss. Guess what? See that little line that just jumped up there? Now, some would draw the line earlier on. And I have no problem with that, quite frankly. Ryan and Danny spoke to us the other day, did a fantastic job. They didn't kiss till the marriage altar. You say, oh, for crying out loud, what a boring dating relationship. I think I would choose to say, wow, what an exciting moment at the altar. But here's the deal. The reason the line is there is because when you go beyond that line, here's what's next: prolonged kissing. Now, gentlemen, if you can take a beautiful woman that you love into your arms and have prolonged kissing without arousing desires in your own body and passions in her own body that you cannot legitimately satisfy, I don't know. You've got ice water in your veins, I guess. But prolonged kissing. You say, oh, that's okay, we do that. But here's what's happening, going to happen next. Couples who engaged in prolonged kissing will invariably have roaming hands. And those hands seem to have radar because they know right where they want to go. They're not lost hands. They're just roaming hands. And they're roaming to the spot they want to go. And there's a couple of spots they'll always invariably go to. It's called petting. Light petting, heavy petting, it happens. And then when that happens, there's intercourse. You say, no, we'll never. If we ever, never. You're going to have a lot of humble pie to eat. Because once you cross the line and start down the road, your conscience is going to be troubled. And I suppose you could stop. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying that's where it's heading. And it'll head there fast in a dating relationship. A healthy marriage will not be built on a dating relationship that was based on sex. You say, we're going to get married anyway. Well, that's great, get married. But I'm going to tell you, there's going to be some issues you're going to have to work through. Sexual ghost and a whole lot of other issues because you abused this whole little thing. Develop healthy dating relationships. There's nothing I want for you any more than a happy, healthy dating relationship. All right?